All right, so you put the odds of a shutdown at 70%. Why do you see this as such a high probability event possibly coming up when we know that the top congressional leaders are meeting with the president today, and there's some bipartisan interest to avoid this shutdown?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I would say that my 70% odds are actually low versus Hill staff that I speak with. For the last several weeks, I've been polling members of the House and the Senate, Ds and Rs, saying, where are y'all on the prospects of a shutdown? And they're closer to 90%. My main concern and my crux of my experience is that nothing happens until the very last minute. So we know, for example, that the House is going to come back and have at least a pro forma session tomorrow at noon. There will be continued votes in the Senate throughout Tuesday. So there is 48 hours left to get a resolution. But the base case on DC and in Polymarket, and in my opinion, is that we're going to see a shutdown. And the question is really, how long is it going to last and how disruptive is it going to be? The meeting with the president this afternoon, in my opinion, is too many cooks in the kitchen. When you have five, big names all together, you're not going to get a breakthrough. You need fewer people. I'm really looking for Leader Thune and Leader Schumer to come together. They're the only chamber that needs bipartisanship.
All right, so Henrietta, you're at 70%. You mentioned Polymarket. I just want to touch on this. The odds on Polymarket of a shutdown have actually fallen. They haven't increased. They've actually fallen. I know you say, according to your informal polling, there's a sense on the Hill that it's at 90%, but on Polymarket, the odds have actually declined. All right, I want to get to this meeting. You say there's too many cooks in the kitchen, but you say one cook in particular is especially important. That's Senator Thune. What makes him so important in this negotiation?
Of all the Republicans in the conversation, he's the only one that actually needs to negotiate physically to get his vote threshold. So Leader Johnson has already indicated and illustrated that he has the votes to get his short-term continuing resolution through. But on the Senate side, he's going to need anywhere between 10 and 20 Democrats. And that is the core area of focus. So the president said a couple weeks back that the senators could do this without Republicans, and that's just not true. You have to get probably 10 to 20 Democrats on board. You're going to lose some of the Republican conference over the ACA subsidies, over funding in general. There are members like Rand Paul who just won't vote for government funding bills that are short term. So there's a wide array of disparities here, and Senator Thune is the one with the biggest hill to climb here.
All right. So, again, you're saying he has to negotiate with the Democrats to try to get this passed in the Senate. So, according to your notes also, you see a high likelihood of a shutdown, but you also see it as being a short-lived shutdown. How does that potentially impact some of the things we were just talking about, the jobs report, inflation reports, and other things that may actually impact the Fed if this government shutdown lasts longer than just a few days?
Yeah, I think the most important for investors is BLS data coming out on Friday, the employment situation. If you think about the schedule here, we have one of the shortest durations of time between a completed September calendar, which comes through on Tuesday night, and then the release on Friday at 8:30. So you really have about 48 hours, which means that all the data will effectively have been compiled. It's the White House's directive as of March 2025 that the only person at BLS will be the acting commissioner. And they're basically going to say, we're not going to be updating the website. We simply won't be using the internet that day. That's pretty weak sauce. So this is going to be directly the administration's decision about whether or not to publish the data that they almost entirely have and have completed and worked through, as opposed to, say, 3, 4, 5 weeks from now, when you've laid off roughly 750,000 federal employees. There's furloughs. Folks are not allowed to come to work. So it's this first report that the White House doesn't have a lot of backing to just keep private unless they actively choose to. The functional ability is there. It's a choice about whether the president wants to release the BLS data or not.
All right. Henrietta, I know obviously nobody has a crystal ball. We don't know how investors are going to react to all this. I think some people may be surprised to see futures higher today with the threat of a shutdown looming. But if there's some type of interruption to these reports, how do you potentially see the equity market reacting, and also the bond market? And is the bond market something this administration will still listen to?
I was in New York all week last week meeting with clients, and this comes up in every single conversation. There's already concerns about the publication of data. We know that the BLS commissioner was fired. We know the president is trying to exert some fiscal dominance over the Federal Reserve and even the Supreme Court. So there are a lot of reasons to have concern. And I think the market will react just based on my own experiences in the room with investors. I think that there's a lot of attention on the bond market for sure. The equities market is really a totally different story, but the bond market particularly participants are heavily focused on this. And more importantly, they want to see this jobs data. It's so critical for interest rates, and everybody's relying on it to the point where we're now putting a heavy emphasis on ADP data even. So I think maybe you'll get a precursor to what the reaction would be on Friday when we see ADP data.